On February 2nd, 2009, Albuquerque police were notified that a human bone was located on the city's West Mesa near 118th Street. In the days and weeks that followed, the remains of 11 women and an unborn child were found at the burial site. The case sparked international attention, and 13 years later, the investigation still fascinates those who hear about it. The women found buried on the mesa have all been identified and laid to rest. This was a tragic answer to their disappearances. 8 additional women who were reported missing around the same time and with similar circumstances have never been found.
Hi, welcome to the Duke City Case Files podcast. I'm Haley. I work for APD in the Public Information Office.
And I'm Rebecca, one of your other hosts here for our podcast. And we just want to thank you all for joining us today on episode 2, West Mesa, the Missings. And we wanted to highlight an aspect of this case that really hasn't received quite as much attention as the West Mesa case involving the women that were found out on the mesa. And so we also want to use this as an opportunity to dispel a lot of the myths that have been out there surrounding this investigation. So with us here today, we have cold case investigators Ida Lopez and Liz Thompson. Thank you both so much for being here with us. And can you each just take some time to tell us a little bit about yourselves and your background with this case?
Yes, I've been with APD since 1995, and then in 2005 I was assigned to the Missing Persons Unit, and then 2015 became a contract investigator, assisting the new investigators that came in to the case.
And Liz, tell us about your involvement now. You're with the cold case unit now.
Yes, so I retired from Albuquerque Police as the sergeant of the homicide unit in 2017, and last summer APD asked if I would come back and help with cold case, and I was very excited that part of my responsibilities would be working with Ida again in actually trying to solve not only the murders of the women that were found, but also the solving what happened to the women that are still missing.
Wow. Well, thank you both for being with us today and speaking on this case. We know that through the past years, there have been tons of documentaries, podcasts, videos, Dateline of this case, and it got tons of media attention. Ida, you were at Ground Zero when this happened. Could you kind of take us through your first involvement from the beginning of these missing women?
Sure, and again, thank you so much for having us. I mean, and just to have the story of these girls, we used to have parents that miss their daughters and don't have them yet. So in 2005 in July, I was assigned to missing persons and investigating missing adults. And I got, along with other missing adults, I received 3 cases of girls that had histories of drug addiction and prostitution. Years prior, in 2002, I was assigned to work attack plan in the Valley by Country Club. There was girls that were setting up their rides to be picked up. They had a history of prostitution and drug use. And I got to know their stories, and so it was kind of a revolving door, whereas they were getting arrested, then they'd get out, then they'd sometimes go to drug rehab, but it was this revolving door. So doing backgrounds on these girls, I thought, something's not right. They just completely disappeared. And so by the fall of 2005, I had the list of 4. And then I asked my supervisor at the time if there were any other cases with girls that had the same background, if she could please assign those to me. And so I started creating a list at that point. And so spent the next few years collecting DNA, dental records, meeting with OMI. We had a cold case investigator who was retired detective, came back to cold case and met with him several times, and then another investigator that came to our unit. So we constantly met as the list kept growing. Then in 2009, I was notified by one of our homicide detectives that a bone had been found on the West Mesa, and that it may be several months before we found an ID. So that was the norm. And then 2 days later, there was a mandible found, and we got an ID, and that was Victoria Chavez, who was one of the girls on my very first flyer. And I said, here we go.
Yeah.
And that's what took us to, led us into the discovery of the rest of the girls.
So you, from the very beginning, before any of the women were even found, you were kind of piecing this together that there was a connection here with these women. They all had a very similar background. Did you have like a gut feeling about, that you were going to find them together? Or can you talk about that?
I think I would always say, if we find one, we're going to find them all. So I created this black and white flyer that I would give to officers, especially in the southeast area, because that's where a lot of the girls hung out. A lot of them knew each other. A lot of them served time together. And so I would say, I guess I just felt, without really thinking about it, that's just what I would always say.
And then so in 2009, we talked about this, but a woman was walking her dog, and that's when the human femur was found, and it was called into 911. Ida, I guess, can you talk about the details that were starting to emerge internally with the media, and like what were you thinking? I know you mentioned like, this is it, this is them. Could you kind of just go into that a little bit?
So really didn't know the significance of that bone until Victoria was identified. And then it was like, we gave backgrounds of all the girls to our lieutenant at that time. And then I think it was later that day that they realized we have more than one body. And so detectives from missing persons and homicide, and mostly violent crimes, went back out to the 118th Street dig site. And our job was to look at bones that were scattered along one of the roads, and we kept finding more and more. And then that's when the body count started emerging. And as far as commingled, those are the graves that were disturbed. And then when the dirt was dumped on the property, which was like 99 acres, those are the bones that we started finding. And so that was a total of 3 of the victims.
So, excuse me, after all the remains were finally recovered, which did take some time, I'm not sure exactly the specifics on that, but all 11 women were identified. We just showed the image here of those women that were all identified. And then, now today there's a memorial park at the site where they were all found, and it's a very moving place. We went out there a couple months ago, and there's markers there now for the women who were killed, and people often bring flowers there to remember the women. And then this year, on the 13th anniversary, we all worked together on a project to really highlight this case and to draw more attention to it. And so we did put a video together to help garner leads, and we did receive a lot of attention across the country after doing that. But although, that case is still being investigated, there's 8 other women that still are missing, that there's a strong belief, right, that there could be connected to the West Mesa or the 118th Street case.
Correct, and it's just because of the time frame. So we actually have 3 in 2003 that went missing, but one of the girls has not been found, and she disappeared after Monica Candelaria and before Doreen Marcus, and her name is Martha Lucher. So she was last seen in September of 2003, not at this scene. But in 2005, we have 3 girls that are missing. In 2006, we have 4 girls that are missing.
And so there's been also a lot of speculation from the public as far as suspects go. Persons of interest have been identified over the years, but I know that today you both want the public to have an open mind about suspects. So Liz, do you want to talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I would love to talk more about that. I want to really, really stress to the public that each time we do some kind of media around this case, we get more tips. Tips come in regularly on this case and always have, but we'll get an increased number of tips. And as soon as someone says, oh, I know it's this particular suspect, and we know that it's this person, the tips stop. And I think the public has the understanding that that's who it is. And what we would really like people to think about is, you know, we all talk about this case and we say, he did this, or he may have moved the burial site. And so people get the understanding that we know that it's a single male offender. Well, that's really just a convenience of language. We don't actually know. We don't actually have the evidence to say that it's this particular suspect or that it is a single male or not. And so I think what we really want people to think about is if in telling any of these stories, they have a memory of something that is suspicious or could be related, don't discount that memory because it's not this person or it's not a male. It could be a woman, it could be a group, it could be a lot of things. The other thing that I would like to really address is that there are a lot of myths out there about this case. It's a fascinating case. There are a number of true crime enthusiasts who love to follow the case and do podcasts and reviews of the case. And I'll give an example of some misinformation. It's out there that one of the persons of interest in this case would buy a comforter before each of the women went missing. And that is not true. There's no evidence that that person bought any comforter, much less on the dates of the disappearance of each woman. So things like that, I think when people hear it and they think, oh, well, it must be that person, we just really want people to remember that we're going to give you the facts that we can give you, but that we know are facts and are based on evidence. Over the years, a number of persons of interest have been developed. And again, we've done recent media. We did the 13th anniversary, and we have gotten a lot of tips since then, including we have received anonymous information naming names, which is great. If you have names and details and dates, that's great. And we would really like anonymous people to contact us back so we can further work those kinds of tips that are very specific with names and dates and so on.
Now, I have a couple questions that kind of sparked when you were talking about that. You know, since we did the anniversary media coverage, had you guys received a significant amount of tips, more than you'd been receiving prior to that? I mean, does that sometimes kind of stir the pot a little with people who might know something?
It definitely did stir up tips coming in. And then you have people calling and saying, you know, this may not be significant, and I didn't call because I didn't think it was significant. And their information led us to some really good information. And also people call in, and it's actually helped with other cases. So no, you know, there's not a tip that's not important. And if it has nothing to do with it, we enter it into the tip database. And we'd rather have information than people not call.
Yeah, we really want people to know, you are not bothering us.
Yeah.
And absolutely. We want the information to be able to work it. We would much rather have information that leads to nothing than not ever know to follow up on that.
And I'd like to acknowledge too, you know, over the years since the women were found, there's always been kind of a stigma tied to their lifestyle and how they were living. And I think it's important for the public to really disregard that and realize these were people, they had loved ones, they had families who truly cared about them and were devastated when they went missing, and to find out what happened to them. Can you guys talk about that? And just, you know, when you are investigating a case, it doesn't hinder your view of them based on what they were doing or what their lifestyle was like to solve this.
So when I would talk to the moms or the dads, whoever reported them missing, I would say, I just need to know more of the background, and there's not a judgment call in that. My point in this is, did they lead a risky lifestyle? Yeah, absolutely. But there's a lot of definitions of risky lifestyle.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, the list can go on and on and on that has nothing to do with prostitution. But I have to keep in mind that as parents, we love our children no matter what. And these parents wanted their daughters to get better. You know, I can't imagine driving down the street, even though maybe some of them feel that their daughters are gone, but if I see a girl and she looks like Anna, or she looks like Nina Herron, you know, you're going to drive fast and you're going to make that U-turn and you're going to want to see. That constant of not knowing, I don't know how these parents deal with it. Again, regardless of the lifestyle. They were all loved. They all have a unique story. We don't know what pains. We don't know what they've all gone through. And so just the heartache, and now their kids are adults, and they want to know. And so I just think the not knowing, and these girls, you know, we have never stopped looking for them. In fact, we've done 3 searches as a result. But they may give us answers to the girls that were buried at the 118th Street. And so, but I just want people to keep in mind that there's families, mothers, fathers, brothers, sisters, and kids of these women that are still looking for them. And they are as much important to us as any other case.
And, you know, I know we're really trying to highlight the 8 women that are still missing. We really want to draw attention to that because you know, as an outsider to APD prior to working here, I didn't know there were other women that had never been found that could be tied to this case. So I think it's something that people really don't realize is out there. Can you talk about any theories that you have, or the fact that they weren't found at the site where the 11 women were? Kind of any thoughts you could talk about publicly as to what you think happened there?
Well, as you can see on satellite imagery, about September 2004, you already see the construction impeding on the suspect's burial ground. And so, again, we don't know where Martha Lucher's at, since she did disappear after Monica and before Doreen. So we believe 2005 is when Anna disappeared. The last time she was seen was about the 22nd, 23rd of January, according to family that we interviewed. But just per satellite imagery, because of the construction, we do not believe that these girls are buried there. We've searched other areas, and I don't know if they'll be together. But yeah, we just keep searching and hoping to find them, and then maybe even Martha Lucher. You know, that one kind of stumps it because she's right in between the 2 girls. So for whatever reason, she's not there.
Yeah, and I think it's important to, this is an important question to ask, is why did we only find those women buried? And so it could have been that the person or people were interrupted by the construction, and it was no longer a safe place to conduct this type of activity. It could be that this person or persons died, moved. There are a lot of explanations that are possibilities, and we have to keep an open mind to all of them. I've been asked, could this have been a serial killer that is known somewhere else? Yes. Again, we have to keep an open mind. We have to look for those pieces of evidence that will actually factually lead us to why we only found those bodies and where these other women are.
And just something of interest to me, you know, most of these women had a very similar appearance, but there's a few from both the missing women and from the women that were found that look very different. There's a little change in either nationality or appearance. Do you have any idea what the reasoning for that was, when there was obviously such a specific look this person or people were going for?
I just think it's who was available. You know, in history, girls who have a history of prostitution are perfect victims. Sometimes they haven't been in contact with their family. They don't have a regular, everyday record. They lose their phones. A lot of them or all of them didn't have EBT cards. There was no record keeping. Dan Valdez with Michelle, every time she'd visit, he would mark it on his calendar. And he'd give her $20, and he said, I know where the $20 went, but I got to see my daughter, and I got to mark it on the calendar. So as far as looks, I just think that it was just an opportunity for the offender, because Leah Peebles comes from Texas. She came here to start a new life, and she was our last victim. And so I just think it was just the opportunity.
So when a killer is choosing a victim, it may not have to do with their looks. It could have to do with their personality, their behavior, their habits, their location, and it could actually have nothing to do with the way they look, the way, their hair color, their skin color, something like that. And again, these are all things that are clues for us that we have to look into.
But the common thing was drugs and prostitution that made them victims, and somebody took advantage of that.
And before we get into that last piece of this about where the case stands now and kind of other investigative tools that are being used, Ida and Liz, for you both, I mean, you've been investigators your entire careers, and to be able to solve this case, what would that mean for you both? And I know, Ida, you've been so invested in this, and it's such a meaningful part of your life to solve this. But what would that mean to bring closure to these families, even families who have passed on and never will know what happened?
I mean, it's huge. It's huge for the families. It's huge for every investigator that's been a part of this investigation. But just to be able to give answers, even though it's not the answers we want, but to give the daughters back, but it would be a huge impact, and personally I feel like I could rest a little bit more, because you're always thinking, you're always strategizing, you're just, okay, well, maybe if we tried this, it's a constant. And I know we can't, or I can't be here all the, for years and years and years, and I'm grateful for the support of the department that we're able to continue to investigate this case, and they know how important it is. But it would be just, it would be an absolute blessing to be able to tell the families we have answers. And so, yeah, it would mean a lot.
Yeah, and I agree with everything Ida is saying. Just to have even a little part of giving those families these answers and being able to solve it. And certainly, if there was an opportunity to bring any justice to it, would be a dream come true. It's just, would be
as a parent,
the best day ever.
Right.
Yeah.
As a parent, I try to put myself in their shoes. Just to know that they're not forgotten, or they're, someone is still looking for them, but for somebody to tell me how important my child is, or to still try to find an answer, that's what I would want. And so that's just something that's always been in the back of my mind. And when I first started this was, I can't imagine them not knowing. That would just be heart-wrenching.
And obviously we've talked about that both of these cases are being actively investigated, and Ida, you get tips all the time. Liz, with the cold case unit, can you talk about any other advanced investigative tools that we might now be using, whether it's DNA or fingerprinting or anything like that? I know we've also worked with the FBI on this case too. Could you talk about where that stands?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's really one of the things that keeps this case alive, is that technology keeps improving, and our ability to look at more evidence and look at things in a different way in all aspects of investigation, whether it's physical evidence or finding people. As far as looking at missing persons, the technology around finding missing persons has also really advanced. And we are making sure, for example, another piece of this puzzle is looking at the unidentified human remains cases that we have. And there are a number of them. Well, we need to make sure that technology is used to say, okay, can we match this missing person with any unidentified human remains cases? Well, the technology exists now to make sure that we have family DNA and we have dental records. And we have now the technology that these databases can talk to each other. And so we have to make sure that those missing persons records, even though maybe they were reported missing in the early 2000s, are they up to date on all of the aspects of those cases? So we're trying to cross all of those T's and dot all of those I's, and it's been really rewarding to make sure that if there's any chance, because it's possible, this is another possibility, that some of these missing women are unidentified human remains in other jurisdictions. Thus, again, maybe we learn that there's a new gravesite. Maybe we learn this particular victim wasn't a part of this same killer's MO or whatever. So we're doing that. We're looking at all of the physical evidence and making sure that the technology that we have available to us now that may not have been used in years past is being looked at. Can we test physical evidence now that we couldn't then? And let's get that done. And we're doing that also with persons of interest. We're making sure, okay, is there something that we have available to us now that we could utilize to either further this person as a person of interest or rule them out? And so it's a big case and a lot of evidence and a lot of details and so on. And yes, we're trying to use any law enforcement partner that has something available, including the FBI, and again, utilizing new technology or new information, making sure that their behavioral analysis is continuing to evolve with things that we're evolving in regards to tips or testing. So yeah, you got to stay on top of it. Things change, and we want to make sure that we're up to date with everything.
And for folks out there that think this is a cold case or a closed case, what is the status of the case? Can you let the public know?
It's not a cold case. Maybe it's an old case because of when everything started, but we get tips almost daily, but the work just continues. We're still looking into things.
I would prefer not to call it a cold case. I know I've talked a lot about semantics, but it is a lot of unsolved cases. So we have some unsolved murder cases, and we have some unsolved missing persons cases. And actually each one of those, that's another thing, this is not a case. This is, each one of those individuals is a case and deserves justice and deserves the attention to solve it.
So as just a recap of everything, can you take us through the timeline that led us to this missing woman?
Yes, absolutely. So in 2003, we have 3 women. 2004, we have 9 women that disappeared. In 2005, we have 3, and in 2006, we have 4 women that disappeared. So there's a belief that when one of the persons of interest was killed in December, that everything stopped. Well, the last known missing disappeared in the summer of 2006. So the reason why we believe all these women are related is just the frequency. So again, we start in 2003 with 3 women, and then in 2006 we end with 4 women. So was the suspect starting an uptick again? We don't know. And then in 2007, there was an article written about the missing women. And so 2007, we don't have any reported missing that fit the same criteria as the rest of the girls.
Do you think that article scared the suspect or suspects off, potentially?
I don't know. I mean, it's hard to say. There's always been the myth of, well, he either died or he's in prison. But they take breaks, and so we know that. But there had never been anything out there that showed that there was missing women or there was anybody looking for the women. And so it was a pretty lengthy article in September of 2007. And so I don't know. I don't know if that had something to do with it.
Yeah, if anyone has any information regarding this case, you can contact the Albuquerque Metro Crime Stoppers at 505-843-STOP or at their website, New Mexico, or crimestoppersnewmexico.com, and you will remain anonymous with any tips that you lead. Or you can also contact investigator Ida Lopez at ilopez@cabq.gov.
And thank you, Ida and Liz, for being here with us. We're very thankful for the opportunity to get to pick your brains about this case and really share some information that people may have never heard that could be helpful for someone who has information. So thank you, and thank you to everyone watching or listening to the podcast. We really appreciate your taking the time to listen to the details of this case, and we hope it can help bring some justice to these families. So thank you, and we hope you tune in to the next episode.